I've been matchmaking all my life. I introduced my best friend and his wife. I introduced my program director, Kevin Drosch, to Inhala. And now I'm going to match you with Inhala. Yes, you two should sleep together. Skip the sleep center. Avoid the CPAP machine. Get in bed with Inhala. It's a custom-fit oral appliance. There's no bulky hoses or uncomfortable mask. Inhala works with your private medical insurance and makes the process seamless. I talked to the people at Inhala.com, and they're going to help you just like they helped out Kevin and his fiancée. She'll finally be able to sleep through the night while Kevin is using Inhala. Follow Kevin's sleep journey right here on 77 WABC. Now is the time for a treatment that is right for you. Visit Inhala.com or call 844-INHALA-1. That's 844-INHALA-1. So like my program director, Kevin, skip the sleep center, avoid the CPAP machine, get in bed with Inhala. Inhala.com, INHALA.com.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I'm having a great time. I hope you are. I hope you've learned a lot in our first hour and a half of the show. But the best is yet to come because my next guest is David Bahnsen, who is a regular on this show and a favorite of this show because he is just an amazing economic and finance guy. He runs a group called the Bahnsen Group. He has many books out, but my two favorite I'm going to mention right now are the latest, I believe, is Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life, which is a great book about how important it is that we work, that we don't just work to make money, but it gives us fulfillment. And the more you work, by the way, the happy you are. Work and believe it or not, work and happiness are very closely tied, as David shows in that book. And then the other one that I have right next to my bedtime table that I always pick up and read just a few pages every night before I go to bed. It's called There's No Free Lunch, 250 Economic Truths. And boy, are they great. So David Bahnsen, thanks so much for joining.
Well, Steve, thanks for the kind words and thanks for having me. I always love doing this.
So quick, we've got a lot to talk about, David, and so I want to get right down to it. First of all, the economy seems to be responding, and certainly the stock market there's been a boost, no question about it. You know, you see it. I saw there was a new New York Fed report that came out on how they do a survey of businesses, David, and they found just in the last week or so, just a surge in business confidence. Obviously, the stock market, not just American shareholders, but shareholders around the world feel, more bullish on the U.S. economy. Am I imagining this, or is it real?
Well, look, confidence and sentiment are always important and useful. They're not as important to supply-siders like us as they are to Keynesians, because Keynesians think animal spirits come, from magical forces and get people to start consuming, where we, of course, want confidence because we want people to produce more. That's what it means to be a supply-sider. But I just want to use 2016 as the illustration of what I see playing out right now. I watched the CEO confidence and business sentiment, and I watched the NFIB small business optimism index from the financial crisis through Obama's presidency, and I never saw either tick up, ever. President Trump gets elected, they both tick up, and then all of a sudden you had meaningful move in markets. Now, let's say you have those indexes move up, Steve, there was a lot of confidence, and then President Trump didn't come in and raise and cut taxes. Let's say he didn't come in and produce more oil or deregulate. Then the confidence wouldn't have mattered. It all would have petered. So, but he did, and that's the point: is the policy has to follow the confidence.
So, David, you follow the policy. You're a policy expert as well. So, when you look at the many things that are on the Trump agenda, I think he's going to race out of the gate. I think he's going to be like Secretariat. As soon as the polls open, he's going to just burst out. But what would you say of the many things that he's been talking about would be the highest priority in terms of, aiding businesses and helping the stock market continue to advance?
Well, first of all, your point about busting out like Secretariat, let's be clear. We're sitting here talking the Saturday before Thanksgiving, and the cabinet's almost done. I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is, and I would have to check the history books if Grover Cleveland was this far ahead. But it almost seems like there's an advantage to a second-term president having time after their first term, to put it all together because they've learned things and they're ready and they know who they want to talk to. The policy things are going to be the three things that they should have been to begin with, and what everybody knows is the most important. The only areas I care about government with economic policy, it's tax, regulation, and energy. That's it. Those are the three things. Yep. And I think that he's going to make the tax cuts permanent. I think there's going to be some other new tax cuts they can get through. There's not going to be massive tax overhaul, but there's going to be ability to pass some new tax cuts, and then the deregulation is going to be extremely important because they did such a good job of that in the first term. And to the extent anything gets done by executive order, it doesn't last. And so Biden came in and reversed a lot of it. Now they got to reverse it back.
So I think you're exactly right. Those three priorities, energy, regulation, and taxes, are critical. And I've been thinking about something, David, and I want a kind of theory I'm developing in my mind. So I would like to run this by you and run this by our listeners and see what you think about it. Because, you and I have known each other a long time, and I think it's safe to say we're both free traders. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we both believe in free trade, as does Arthur Laffer, and as does Larry Kudlow, and as does Steve Forbes, and so many other smart people, Milton Friedman, et cetera. So free trade is absolutely important. And it's one of the reasons we become the richest country in the world, in my opinion, is because there are many reasons, but one of them is that we do have open markets. Now, what Trump is saying, if I understand him correctly, David, is we're going to increase the tax on things that come into the United States, the things that are made in Japan or, Germany or China, especially. And then you've got people, like Larry Summers say, oh my God, that's going to be a disaster because, tariffs hurt the economy. And he's right that in a vacuum, a tariff would hurt the economy. But what Trump is saying is, well, wait a minute, we're going to increase the tariff on things coming into the United States, but I want to lower the tax on things that are made in Michigan or Ohio or Pennsylvania. And I'm trying to think this through, David. I mean, does that make sense, or how do you see that?
Sid here from my good friends at Inhala.com. Let's talk about serious business. Sleep apnea. Whether you've been diagnosed with it or afraid you have it, I've got the solution. Inhala is here to give you your life back by giving you your breath back. They make it easy to get help for sleep apnea because living without restful sleep is simply no way to live. Inhala gives you a custom-fitted oral appliance that opens your airway so you naturally breathe the way nature intended. The best part is they offer virtual consultations and in-home sleep testing. No overnight stays at a sleep center. Plus, Inhala has all the doctors that you'll need. Appointments are virtual, and it's all covered by your private medical insurance. Inhala does it all, from diagnosis to the delivery. Don't suffer from another sleepless night or daytime fatigue. Visit Inhala.com or call 844-INHALA-1. That's 844-INHALA and the number 1. Call now, 844-INHALA-1. That's 844-INHALA-1.
This episode is brought to you by Global X. Since 2008, Global X ETFs has been committed to empowering investors with unexplored, intelligent solutions. Global X specializes in exchange-traded funds that offer exposure to the artificial intelligence ecosystem, including themes like data centers, robotics, semiconductors, and cloud computing. To learn more about Global X's entire suite of ETFs, from covered calls, fixed income, emerging markets, and more, visit globalxetfs.com.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be. With
the E to T, you're listening to an app at PC Game Pass. Want new games on day one like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle? How about living out your Sims life with EA Play? We're talking high-quality PC games all for one low monthly price. We got you. Learn more at xbox.com/PC Game Pass or click the banner. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle available December 9th, 2024. Game catalog varies by region and over time. Okay, that's the ad. You can go back to doing whatever you were doing now.
Well, there's a few complicating circumstances, Steve. There are some things that we can't make here or make here as efficiently as are made elsewhere.
That's true.
Or even if we're going to start making them here, that assumes we're going to have the workers to do it, which I don't accept that premise at all.
Yeah.
And it also is the case that there's a transition time. And you can have a real big increase in cost while you wait to transition. Now, what there wouldn't be a transition time, see, his first term, he focused more not on protectionism, but on better deals with China. If what he's focused on is tariffs as a negotiating tactic with China, that can happen a lot quicker. But if it's, anybody who's importing from anywhere, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Mexico, we're not prepared in Ohio and Arizona to do all that, and that could end up being more problematic. And so what I'm praying for, and frankly, I'm cautiously optimistic of, is that they're going to take it case by case and be nuanced. But yes, if we just, as a blanket statement, said anything that is coming in from elsewhere, the law of comparative advantage would say there's a reason why some things are coming in from elsewhere. And what people don't realize, Stephen, you know this, and obviously Laffer, Forbes, our friends know this, but I really want listeners to understand the vast majority of what we import is not finished product. It's for a part of a product that will end up getting finished here. It's called intermediate processed goods.
Well, the perfect example, David, of what you're talking about is when Trump tried to impose steel tariffs, to protect steel jobs in places like Pennsylvania. The problem was that you might have saved some steel jobs, but then that negatively affected, for example, our other factories and industries that use steel. And so it was almost like, we were swimming faster and faster, but against a tide. And on balance, it doesn't appear that the steel tariffs actually save jobs.
No, and in fact, if you want to protect steel jobs, we have a great example. You have two major steel companies in America, U.S. Steel and Nucor, and one of them is unionized and one of them is right to work. And there were no jobs lost at Nucor. Okay, so all you need is less regulation to protect those types of jobs. But I will say this, Milton Friedman taught us well. When you measure the impact of tariffs, you can't only look at the imports and say, well, we're going to help manufacturers because these products that are coming in, we're taxing more, and so it's going to incentivize, because then that country retaliates against our exporters.
Yes.
And so how many of our companies lose jobs because they were requiring an export-oriented customer on the other side? They're exporting to other customers. So you have to look at the visible and invisible effects of the policy. And where a lot of people said, you free traders, you're market fundamentalists, you don't get it. No. I understand if he wants to negotiate better deals, if we want good terms, if we don't want them, if there's human rights incidents going on, national security. But we gotta talk consistently about what we're talking about. And if all we're talking about is trying to do protectionism, then we have to realize that you may think you're helping a steel job here or a Ohio job there, but you don't see the Kansas job you're hurting. Right. And that's exactly the big point here.
Now, I think if Donald Trump were on this conversation, what he might say is, well, look, these countries are already imposing high tariffs on us, and our buddy, you and I are good friends with Larry Kudlow, and Larry likes to talk about this idea of reciprocity, and Trump likes to talk about it too. And it's basically, if you're going to punch us in the nose, we're going to punch you back in the nose. And what Trump would say, and I just like your reaction to this, is whether or not in other words, can we move towards freer trade by Trump basically saying, look, you got to lower your tariffs on our stuff. And, China imposes pretty high tariffs on U.S. goods. And so could that strategy, are you comfortable with that strategy, David?
Well, this, Steve, is where, unfortunately, I learned too well from my economic mentors, you, Larry, Forbes. I don't disagree that you want fair deals. But my question is, who gets to pick what's a fair deal? The buyer and seller, or a bureaucrat in Washington? Right. If I'm getting punched in the nose, I'm not going to do the deal, am I? And so the buyer and seller are most qualified to make that determination. And if China is imposing unfair terms, that's where the U.S. customer or producer has the ability to say, I'm going to bring my business to Vietnam, or I'm going to bring my business to Minnesota. But I don't believe that we necessarily need Washington, D.C. to be making those decisions.
So to change subjects for a minute, because we don't have that much time left, and appreciate, this is David Bahnsen, who runs the Bahnsen Group. You see him all the time on Fox News, on Fox Business News, and is the author of many books, including There's No Free Lunch, which I really recommend. By the way, that's a great Christmas present to get the members of your family, because it's just a wonderful way of explaining how the economy works to your kids or your neighbors or family members. Trump has got an incredibly wide-ranging agenda to rebuild the American economy. He has this new commission that I've been talking with my listeners about for the last few weeks that I'm very excited about finding waste and fraud and rooting it out in the government, because it is incredibly bureaucratic. It is incredibly wasteful. There's an enormous amount of fraud. And, a lot of the people on the left have been kind of poo-pooing that, you're not going to be able to find the waste, or you're not going to be able to cut the budget. What say you? How do you feel like that's going, and how important do you think it is?
Well, here's what happened this week that really gave me a boost of optimism. Is they came out, they wrote an op-ed. By the way, Elon's getting a lot of attention on this thing, but I can't say enough about Vivek Ramaswamy in this thing because of his ability to communicate and articulate. He's a very effective messenger, and that's where this thing's going to get a lot of its effectiveness. Is they got to go embarrass some people, okay?
Right.
And you're not just going to have social media, which Elon's great at, but you got to go make the case. And this thing about getting government workers back to work 5 days a week.
Yes.
I wrote in my own Dividend Cafe. I do a weekly investment commentary, dividendcafe.com. And I wrote yesterday, first of all, people going to work is more productive than not going to work. And second of all, if they want to save cost, all the government people that are going to quit their job over this, because God forbid they actually have to go back to work 4 years after the pandemic ended, that's good too. We don't need their payroll anymore. So I think go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I just think it's a great step out of the gate. If you're talking about productivity and efficiency, getting people to actually have to be accountable to go to their job sounds like a great place to start.
So I've been thinking a lot. You're the perfect person to ask this question to. I had, by the way, earlier on the show, I had Bob Nardelli on, who's one of the great businessmen in America. He ran Chrysler, he ran Home Depot, he was at GE, and he was. I was mentioning this to him, and I'd like your response to it. I've been in Washington most of my life, so I'm in the swamp. I see how it doesn't work, and then but I have also worked in the private sector. In the private sector, you run a business, David. Your incentive is to cut your costs. In other words, to minimize your costs and be the most efficient you can, so you can make a profit. Because that's why there are businesses, to make a profit. In the government, what I've found is the incentives are exactly the reverse. In other words, if you're running a government agency, your incentive is to just get as much money from the taxpayers as you can, because that's how you get power in Washington, by how big your budget is. There's no incentive for these federal managers to cut their budget.
Well, that's exactly right. And so there's two things as classical free market economists say. One is that Friedrich Hayek taught us they don't have the knowledge to essentially plan the economy. And the other is Milton Friedman taught us they don't have the incentives.
That's right.
They don't have the profit motive, and in fact, they have contrary incentives, because that's power and getting entrenched, bureaucracy is more of an incentive than profitability, efficiency, and productivity. Look, I'm kind of in the middle of the road on this thing with Elon and Vivek, because on one hand, Steve, I really wish they hadn't said they're going to cut $2 trillion, because they're most certainly
it's not going to happen.
They're not going to cut $2 trillion.
Yeah.
And I want to underpromise and overdeliver here.
Yeah, me
and
too.
I think that they have a good chance of doing that. But look, it starts with fraud, waste, and corruption, and there's hundreds of billions of that right there.
We got 30 seconds left, David. So last question. David Bahnsen is my guest. You're the guy who I listen to on the markets. The market's been on a bit of a boom. Is it going to continue?
Yeah, well, you're in a tug of war in markets right now. That's what all investors need to understand. There's a horrible time to invest, which is when you have bad fundamentals and bad valuations. Right now, you have a tug of war between good fundamentals and tough valuations.
When you say, hold on, just I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. When you say bad valuations, does that mean they're overvalued?
Yeah, things are very expensive. Risk assets are expensive. And so on one hand, you have good fundamental backdrop, but on the other hand, you have to wonder how much of that is already priced in. Corporate profits are very good. Corporate profits are very good, but so is the market's valuation telling you that. So I am really recommending people be selective. Rotate from growth into value.
Okay, that's David Bahnsen. Thanks for joining, David.
Sid here from my good friends at Inhala.com. Let's talk about serious business. Sleep apnea. Whether you've been diagnosed with it or afraid you have it, I've got the solution. Inhala is here to give you your life back by giving you your breath back. They make it easy to get help for sleep apnea, because living without restful sleep is simply no way to live. Inhala gives you a custom-fitted oral appliance that opens your airway so you naturally breathe the way nature intended. The best part is they offer virtual consultations and in-home sleep testing. No overnight stays at a sleep center. Plus, Inhala has all the doctors that you'll need. Appointments are virtual, and it's all covered by your private medical insurance. Inhala does it all, from diagnosis to the delivery. Don't suffer from another sleepless night or daytime fatigue. Visit Inhala.com or call 844-INHALA-1. That's 844-INHALA and the number 1. Call now, 844-INHALA-1. That's 844-INHALA-1.